What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 59, and another weekly episode of our NXT and NXT UK recap. We're also going to be looking at the NXT Breakout Final, the Breakout Tournament Final. It's been running for the last month or so on NXT TV. We're going to be having a little look at that, including one or two things that have come up through WWE and Monday Night Raw. We're going to be focusing on the King of the Ring tournament announcement, which is going to be kicking off next Monday and culminating at the Clash of Champions pay-per-view in September. So loads to get stuck into, loads to talk about. A really exciting episode of Wrestling Johners today. We are going to be accompanied by a guest host, as we do most weeks. We've got Kieron Reed returning this week to the podcast. So welcome to the Wrestling with Johners podcast again, Kieron. Great to have you on board.
Hi, it's great to be back. I've had a bit of a long drought away. It's been 6 weeks, but I'm glad to be back. Glad to get my point across, and I'm glad to talk to everyone. I hope everyone enjoys listening.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to hear more from you very soon. As I do at the beginning of every single episode, just to throw out a few plugs for our social media, so you know where to get in touch with us if you want to. You can get in touch with us on Twitter, of course. Our Twitter handle is @withjohners_pod. We're on instagram.com/wrestlingwithjohners. And of course, go out and find our ever popular, fully interactive Facebook community page on Facebook. Go out and search Wrestling with Johners. And of course, if you listen to us, listen to this podcast and you enjoy listening to Wrestling with Johners, please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, share, and shout about Wrestling with Johners. This is the only podcast for all of your weekly NXT and NXT UK weekly updates. We do touch on a lot of WWE and all-round wrestling goodness. Very soon we're going to be talking to Kieron about his recent Progress Wrestling experience. We do also do features on New Japan, AEW, and indie wrestling as well. So please spread the word, tell your friends and tell your family, and help to grow this podcast. So back to you, Kieron. Once again, thanks for coming on board this week. Now, you are an avid Progress Wrestling fan. Every time you come on, you always give us a bit of an update as far as what shows you've been to, matches that's excited you at the Progress shows. Now, the last one you went to was a few weeks ago in July now, and tell us a little bit about that. What was the title of that show? Because they always have quite imaginative subheadings. They have Progress Chapter whatever, then they have a kind of a rather interesting subheading. What was the subheading or the title of this chapter that you went to in July then, Kieron?
I'm just looking up now. I forgot what it was called. Entertaining Friends.
Very good. And so this was a few weeks ago, and I don't think they've had any Progress shows since then. So this is possibly the most recent one, not including the Canadian show where they was up against Smash Wrestling. But tell us a little bit about the show you went to, some of the matches, some of the results, and tell us a bit about the main events. I'm going to hand it over to you now, Kieron.
So they did have another show after the Manchester show, which was at the Ballroom, called Juice Me Up. That was 2 weeks ago now, which had the Grizzled Young Veterans against Aussie Open.
Yes, that's where GYV won the belts back, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
So that was another one I went to. That was the one after the one I went to. So the one I went to was a pretty good show. I kind of got a little bit drunk because, let's face it, it was my birthday the week before and I fancied having a bit of a drink whilst I was watching the wrestling. Met loads of local fans up there, which give me the heads up on a few promotions up there as well, so I've been keeping an eye on those. Because obviously, as you know, Progress always do the pre-show stuff, which had two of the companies from up there on the pre-show, which actually was quite a stellar match for a pre-show match.
Yeah.
We had some good matches in there. I mean, we had Eddie Kingston versus Jonathan Gresham, which was a good match, which is now built up to the match for Natural Progression series, which they've dropped, which is LAX and Eddie Kingston versus Lucky, which is CCK, Chris Brooks and Jonathan Gresham, with Lucky Kid versus obviously LAX and Eddie Kingston, which will happen during the Natural Progression tournament on the 14th of September, which I'll be at. Main event was Elio versus Walter, which was absolutely amazing. Honestly, if you get an opportunity to anyone who has Progress on Demand, watch that whole day, because the whole day is amazing. I don't really want to give too much away, because obviously I don't want to spoil it for people who are obviously watching on catch up and stuff. All I can do is give my views, and my views are it's one of the best shows I've been to outside of Camden, which is a few now. Obviously I'm looking forward to September and the 2 shows I've got in September with them. So, yeah.
There we go. Well, I know that Ilya Dragunov and Walter have had they've had their battles over in Germany for WXW. I'm not sure if they've met before in Progress, but that's 2 really stellar competitors, 2 really intense, hard-hitting guys going up against one another. And I'm guessing that was for the Progress World Title. Go out and watch it I'm guessing it's already available on demand, Kieron, at the moment.
Yeah, so you've got... So what's been dropped is you've got all the shows from Newcastle and Manchester, so the weekend that I went to. You've got the one that was 2 weeks after, it was just juiced up, and they've dropped an unedited version of Progress versus Smash on there as well, which you get to see Robbo versus Walter. So, yeah, so the next one won't go up until probably 2 weeks after the next one, which is next weekend.
Superb. So thanks for your progress update there, Kieron. I just want to kind of update the listeners on some of our up-and-coming shows, a bit of our schedule updates over the next few weeks. Now, next week, we're going to have our usual NXT and NXT UK update, and we're going to have a debutante as a guest host. We've got Ashley Clements, who I think Kieron knows quite well. He's your regular Progress wrestling buddy who you go to all the wrestling shows with, and Ashley's going to be making his Wrestling with John's debut next Thursday. We skip ahead to Friday the 30th of August, where we'll have Kieron back on the Wrestling with John's podcast. We'll be covering the usual NXT and NXT UK, but it will be the go home episode to NXT UK Takeover Cardiff, which will actually be taking place the very next day. So Kieron will be on Friday the 30th. We'll be doing our Takeover Cardiff preview show on that date. The day after, Saturday the 31st, me and Kieron and other Wrestling with John's friends will be in Cardiff for NXT UK Takeover Cardiff, and that card is shaping up to be a really fantastic card. We'll talk more about NXT UK and how the matches are kind of stacking up fairly soon. Then the following day, Sunday the 1st of September, I'll be joined by David Anderson, where we'll actually be doing our NXT UK Takeover Cardiff review. So David Anderson will be joining for the Takeover Cardiff review there on Sunday the 1st. On Monday the 2nd, we'll be having our AEW All Out pay-per-view review with Ash Crawford and Chris Thornton. You may remember Ash and Chris, who helped me review the Double or Nothing pay-per-view in May. So we've got a lot of really top wrestling to cover here on the Wrestling with John's podcast over the next few weeks. Can't wait to talk more about all the fun wrestling action that's going to be taking place on our screens or live in person over the next few weeks. As you may be aware, Wrestling with John is now selling merchandise and selling t-shirts on teespring.com. Just go to teespring.com/stores/Wrestling with Johners, and if you purchase any t-shirts or merchandise before the end of August, you can get 10% off your purchase. So, Kieron, one thing that I mentioned at the very top of the show was on Monday Night Raw this past Monday, they announced kind of the introduction of the King of the Ring. The King of the Ring tournament will be making a return. It starts with first round matches taking place this coming Monday. And I do have the schedule here, as a matter of fact. So the first round takes place on Monday Night Raw next Monday, the 19th. The first round will continue on SmackDown the following day, Tuesday the 20th. There will be separate dates for the quarterfinal shows, which will no doubt be a week or two after the first round matches. Then the semi-final matches, they have got dates that I have in front of me here. So the semi-final matches will take place on both Raw and SmackDown, week commencing the 9th and the 10th of September. And then the final will take place on the 15th September, Sunday the 15th, North Carolina, the Spectrum Centre at Clash of Champions. So the combatants, it's quite an impressive list of combatants. But before I get into kind of who's going to be going, I haven't got the brackets, but who's going to be in the tournament from the SmackDown and the Raw side. I mean, the King of the Ring tournament was always a very important part of the wrestling calendar, certainly throughout the 90s. But the very first WWF King of the Ring was Don Morocco back in 1985. The late, great Harley Race, who's recently passed away, was the second King of the Ring when he beat Pedro Morales to become King of the Ring in 1986. Randy Savage was the King in 1987. Ted DiBiase won the King of the Ring tournament in 1988. Tito Santana in 1989. Bret Hart remarkably won it in 1991 and then 1993. Now, 1993 was the first pay-per-view presentation. All the previous King of the Ring tournaments were done at live shows, house shows, certainly nothing that was screened on pay-per-view or in any big way back in the 80s. So 1993 was the first televised or pay-per-view King of the Ring, which Bret Hart won, and managing to beat Bam Bam Bigelow in the final. The following year, his brother, the Rocket, Owen Hart, beat Razor Ramon in the final to be the 1994 King of the Ring. And then, rather embarrassingly, Mabel was the King of the Ring in 1995. And then it all got back on track again, nice and smoothly, with Stone Cold Steve Austin really kind of smashing that glass ceiling and becoming, it was kind of the emergence of the Stone Cold character, and he gave that classic Austin 316 promo after beating Jake Roberts in the final in 1996. Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, won the title in 1997, beating Mankind in the final. Ken Shamrock, this is a name you may not associate with the King of the Ring tournament, won in 1998, beating The Rock in the final, which sounds rather surprising on paper. Billy Gunn was the king in 1999. And Kurt Angle 2000. The Edge was King of the Ring in 2001. Brock Lesnar 2002, and then we have to skip forward 4 years before Booker T became King Booker in 2006. William Regal in 2008. Sheamus was King Sheamus in 2010, and then Bad News Barrett was the last official King of the Ring, beating Neville in the final of a one-night tournament they had on the WWE Network in 2015. 4 years later, we get to the tournament that will culminate in September that we're going to be talking about now, Kieran. So do you have any fond memories of any previous Kings or any previous King of the Ring tournaments? I know that you're probably a little bit younger than me, but there's some kind of classic winners to this tournament and some really fun and interesting kind of pay-per-views over the years. Any that jump out as you as being kind of memorable for yourself, Kieran?
So obviously you can't go wrong with the Austin win. Obviously his speech at the end, like you said, it was the culmination of the Austin 316. But for me, the one that stood out the most was the one Kurt Angle won. 3 matches, one night. He had that insane street fight with
Shane McMahon.
Yeah, and it was just brutal. That whole show was brutal, and how he won at the end, I do not know.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, that's the one that stands out the most. I think that was probably one of the first live pay-per-views I stayed up to watch.
That was a great pay-per-view as well. That was a very, very memorable pay-per-view. And like I say, Kurt Angle beat Rikishi in the final there in 2000, but his match against Shane McMahon, I'm not sure if that was a semi-final match or whether that was just a separate match to the tournament. But yeah, that
match to the tournament.
Yeah, that was incredible.
He shaped him win the first match, because if I remember correctly, the match with Shane was the last match, so he would have had to go through. I think it was Edge he fought in the semi-finals,
right?
Then Rikishi,
yeah,
and then Shane in the fight in one of the last matches of the night. So I think Shane helped him beat Edge, so he'd be more tired for his match with him later in the evening.
Gotcha. Yeah, but like I say, just if you look down the list, there's a lot of Hall of Famers there. But then, it's quite poignant that we lost Harley Race last week, and he was the second King of the Ring. Not long after joining the WWF, I think he joined in 1985 or early 86, became King Harley Race later on that year. And although he was always considered a very tough, no-nonsense, straight wrestler, you could say, a bit of a shoot wrestler to a certain degree. He certainly wasn't a high spots wrestler by any stretch of the imagination. He did embrace the King gimmick when he came over to the WWF in 85, 86. And yes, I mean, Harley Race had a reasonably memorable match against the Junkyard Dog at WrestleMania 3. He did have a bit of a feud with Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship around this same time as well. But Harley Race will definitely be missed. But looking down the list, I think Bret Hart's winning 93, Owen Hart's winning 94, Stone Cold in 96, and so on and so on. But let's have a look at the competitors. Now, there's 16 names, 8 from SmackDown and 8 from Raw. But looking at the SmackDown half, I suppose, and I'm guessing that the first round is going to be 4 Raw matches and 4 SmackDown matches. They could mix it up a little bit, but I'm sure further down the tournament, that's when we'll kind of get to see the kind of inter-brand matches. But for SmackDown, you've got Ali, former Mustafa Ali. Now, he's a guy that's definitely on the rise, in my opinion. Definitely, I think he's on the verge of a decent push. His promos that he seems to do kind of in his own time with a handheld camera that do tend to get aired on WWF.com or WWE.com are always very, very gritty and real. But Ali is a strong favourite of mine. Andrade, I'm surprised they've not done a lot more with Andrade up until now, to be honest with you. So they could be waiting to give him a good push, and the King of the Ring tournament could be a good excuse to do that. Apollo Crews, I think he's going to be fodder in the first round for somebody, to be honest with you. I can't see Apollo Crews progressing, although he has all the talent in the world. I just don't think he's got any sort of momentum at the moment, to be honest with you. Buddy Murphy is definitely kind of getting his name out there. He was on the sidelines for a number of months, certainly after the brand split, and getting drafted to SmackDown. Nothing really happened to him up until recently, when he's been involved in a bit of a feud with Roman Reigns, which is getting him a lot of prominence on SmackDown. Chad Gable, as I mentioned to Kieran off air, Chad Gable's been seen a lot more recently on 205 Live, especially in a bit of a mini feud with Jack Gallagher that he's been having recently. So it'd be great to see Chad Gable involved in a tournament like this. And he's very similar in terms of style to a Kurt Angle, and we mentioned that Kurt won the tournament in 2000. Elias, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is still the 24/7 champion after winning it this past week. Kevin Owens, who's on a bit of a hot streak at the moment in his new babyface role, having recently beaten Shane McMahon, who we've spoken about already, beating Shane McMahon at SummerSlam this past Sunday, and Shelton Benjamin. And I think much like Apollo Crews, 2 very, very talented, gifted, athletic wrestlers, but I can't see Shelton progressing too far. So amongst the SmackDown names there, any that kind of jump out at you there, Kieran, to start off with the first 8?
Obviously, you've got to say KO.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you said, he's been on a massive push. I love Kevin Owens. I always have loved Kevin Owens. I'm not exactly a small person, and Kevin Owens is like the guy that I look at saying, even if you are kind of heavy set and overweight, you can make it to WWE sort of thing.
He's not got the conventional build, is he, for a wrestler? But I think he's, the fact that he is quite athletic and a great promo, excellent on the mic. He's got a lot of charisma, a lot of character there. That's always done him favours. But good shout for Kevin Owens. Anybody else?
To be fair, the whole SmackDown side, apart from obviously Shelton Benjamin and Apollo Crews, and I think Chad Gable as well. If you look at the other people in it, so they're going to have one match that's going to steal the show on SmackDown with the qualifiers, if that's how they're doing it. And if they do it as Andrade and Ali, I think whoever wins that will be a dark horse in the tournament. It will be the person that people won't expect to get far, and will probably make it to the finals.
But
again, like I've said before, it's all down to WWE booking. And they've missed tricks in the past, and let's face it, they'll probably miss tricks again. So I can't really... I can say who I think on the SmackDown side will make it to the final, because you know for a fact at some point it's going to be a SmackDown guy versus a Raw guy in the final. They wouldn't segregate it like they have if it wasn't going to be.
Yeah.
So for me, it'll be KO going through on the SmackDown side.
Very interesting. Let's have a look at the 8 competitors from the Raw side of things. You've got Baron Corbin, who I know the WWE are very high on, but he plays a good heel. I don't think he's that great in the ring, to be honest with you. Cedric Alexander, who's been on a bit of a run recently in a bit of a mini feud with Drew McIntyre. Cesaro, who I think is everybody's favourite, nearly guy. Like I say, he's been multi-time tag team champion with Sheamus. He has been the United States champion in the past, but he's never really kind of broken through that kind of ceiling for being a world title contender. But Cesaro would make an awesome King of the Ring, in my opinion. Drew McIntyre, I know that he's a big favourite of yours. So Drew will be, I think, up there as one of the favourites to begin the tournament with anyway. The Miz, it'd be interesting to see how far The Miz go. Like I say, I like The Miz. He's never going to be the greatest wrestler or the greatest talker in the world, but he's pretty decent at both. But it'll be interesting to see how far The Miz goes. I don't really see him as a finalist, in my opinion. Ricochet, yep. King Ricochet didn't he play King Puma in Lucha Underground? So King Ricochet has a good ring to it, and Sami Zayn, he could be first round fodder again, unfortunately, despite the fact he's extremely talented, and Samoa Joe, who's going to be another kind of leading contender. But any one of those 8 from the Raw brand jump out at you as being potentially finalists to go up against your Kevin Owens?
So for me, like I said before, it's all about how WWE book it. So you've got the fact that obviously you've had people. So obviously you've had Baron Corbin in the title picture for quite a while. So you can't really just be like, I'm going to use him as cannon fodder in a King of the Ring tournament. He's got to be up there as one of the potential finalists. It's a given for that fact alone, unless obviously WWE do what they do normally, and if you lose a title, yeah, you're going back to being a jobber. See, the Raw side's hard to call because Raw's got all the big names. So don't get me wrong, I'd love to see Ricochet win it. Probably won't happen, but I'd love it. I'm a massive fan of Ricochet ever since I saw him live in Milton Keynes versus Will Ospreay. Absolutely brilliant match, obviously with Lucha Underground as well. Watched his stuff before that, Prince Puma. Absolutely brilliant. To be fair, there's everyone on the Raw side has the ability to be a potential finalist, apart from probably Cedric. But again, it could be one of those things where they put him up against Drew. He hasn't beat Drew yet, so could beat him to upset Drew in the tournament. It's one of those things where it swings and roundabouts, but as I said to you off air, for me it'll probably be a KO Drew McIntyre final, and Shane will get involved in some way, shape or form, because let's face it, that's not over. So just for predictable WWE booking, that'll be my final. It'll be Drew winning it by some sort of interference with Shane.
Yeah, I think you're on to a good point there, and I think if you look at the strongest person from the SmackDown card, you've got to go with Kevin Owens, and the strongest wrestler from the Raw card, from the Raw brand, you've got to go with Drew McIntyre. So I'm inclined to agree with you that it probably will be a Drew McIntyre Kevin Owens final. But like I say, I'd like to see Ali do well. I'd like to see Andrade do well. I'd like to see Cesaro do well, and Ricochet. So there's 4 or 5 or 6 people there that could make really strong quarterfinal, semi-final matches, but it wouldn't surprise me if they're looking for a pay-per-view quality match between 2 experienced, big-named players. You could say, I think it's got to be Drew McIntyre versus Kevin Owens. So I hope that it's not as predictable as that. I wouldn't mind seeing somebody newer, fresher, like an Ali or an Andrade, get a good push and potentially making a bit of a name for themselves. But I think the positive thing to come out of all of this is that they've reintroduced the King of the Ring, which was always a popular format until it was kind of misused, certainly the last 2 or 3 times when King Barrett and King Sheamus, where they kind of blew off the whole tournament in one night, really, with like 2-minute matches. So they're giving it room to breathe. The first round is going to be over 2 nights, next week on Raw and next week on SmackDown. The quarterfinals will be over Raw and SmackDown over 2 nights as well. The same for the semi-finals, and then the final will be saved for a big pay-per-view occasion. So they're spreading it over an entire month. So that's the way the King of the Ring tournament should be done. Instead of blowing it all off on 1 or 2 nights, they're doing it over a decent amount of time. They're giving it room to breathe, which will hopefully lead to some really good matches. I can't wait to see what comes out of the first round next week. So we look forward to that. And I'm sure that myself and Ashley will be kind of covering some of the first round matches on next week's Wrestling with Johners. But let's have a little talk about our favourite subject, NXT UK, or certainly one of our favourite subjects. And I know that me and you will be going to Takeover Cardiff in just a few weeks' time. We'll be talking about how the card is shaping up very, very soon. But let's have a look at this week's episode then. And so we're only kind of 3 more episodes of NXT UK on the WWE Network before the big show at the Motorpoint Arena on the 31st of August. So, it's kind of coming around fast. And you can see by watching this week's episode that the storylines are coming together and the matches, are certainly coming together as far as how the card's going to shape up for Cardiff. The first match of this week's episode of NXT UK was Flash Morgan Webster versus Mark Coffey. So, as you would expect, Coffey is accompanied to the ring by Gallus and his stablemates Wolfgang and I don't think Joe Coffey was there on the entrance. Certainly Wolfgang was, and of course they are tag team partners, and they've already been confirmed as number 1 contenders for the NXT UK Tag Team Championships against the Grizzled Young Veterans in Cardiff. Now, of course, Flash Morgan Webster and Mark Andrews are trying to earn their spots so they can make it a 3-way match in Cardiff in just a couple of weeks' time. So Flash Morgan Webster has not long returned from an injury that has kept him on the sidelines for a few months, and the fans at the Plymouth Pavilion gave Webster a great reception on his entrance for his match. As per Johnny Saint's wishes, if Flash Morgan and Mark Andrews proves themselves over the next few weeks, then they will indeed get a tag title shot in Cardiff in a 3-way match against Gallus and GYV, the Grizzled Young Veterans. So for Webster and Andrews, there's a lot on the line in this match tonight, and especially for the Modfather. The match soon goes to the outside where Webster capitalises with a dive through the ropes onto Mark Coffey with a follow-up of a moonsault from the second turnbuckle for the first 2 count of the match. Coffey then is doubly quick to react with a huge choke slam for a 2 count of his own. Then Flash attempts a top rope swanton, only for Wolfgang to get up onto the ring apron to distract Flash Morgan, causing him to miss the move with Coffey rolling out of harm's way. Just then, Mark Andrews neutralises the threat of Wolfgang with a senton of his own off the side of the ring apron. And with that, Morgan Webster is lying injured in the centre of the ring. Mark Coffey goes over to grab Webster, only for Flash Morgan to surprise Coffey with a small package, getting the unexpected pinfall victory, and in the process getting a win and 1 step closer to a tag title shot for his team at TakeOver. So a nice opener to this week's NXT UK, Kieron, and an important win for Flash Morgan Webster as we get ever closer to TakeOver Cardiff. Give us your thoughts on this opening match of this week's NXT UK.
Personally, I like the match. I like the fact that there's something on the line for it.
Yeah.
But for me, I think they should have really given more time. I feel like the match was rushed, and obviously I know they're trying to build. So obviously before this week's episode, the card was a little bit driven drab with what's going on it for NXT Cardiff. So I feel like they're just trying to push like a few matches in there and trying to build as many storylines as quick as possible, as we'll talk about obviously later on, because there's a couple of matches that are done later on in the show. It's a good result for those. it wouldn't surprise me. Next week, obviously, you're going to have Mark Andrews versus Wolfgang as the other match. Wouldn't surprise me if you see GYV come down in that, potentially mess up a potential way to stop Andrews and Webster getting in it, and then they win by DQ or something, and then they end up with a title match. It's pretty much a given that the three-way match is going to be on the card, for me anyway, just because obviously they're local boys and they actually haven't got anyone from Cardiff on the card yet, or from Wales on the card. So
Sure.
For me, it will probably be a given that they're going to end up in the match. But all round, good match. Commentary did good way of building up the storyline, because for me the match really didn't. So most of the matches, so entertaining matches are where they're telling a story. For me, I think the match was derailed by the interference on the outside of Wolfgang. There was too much emphasis on the fact that the partners were on the outside and Wolfgang kept getting involved. And Mark Coffey and Wolfgang, for me, they're not a strong tag team. Obviously, you look at the people in Gallus and you'd think it would be Joe and Mark as the tag team, obviously, because they've done it in the past. Obviously, they're brothers. So they're still kind of building on me. Don't get me wrong, they're massive powerhouses and they've come on leaps and bounds from when they were first formed. But I think the introduction with Webster and Andrews into a triple threat match will make the match at Cardiff that little bit better. I mean, Webster and Andrews can go the distance, where I don't think Coffey and Wolfgang can have like a 20-30 minute match where it's just pure high spots and stuff, which Joe can. But yeah, for me, it was a good match. Not great storytelling in the match. I think it was made more by the commentary. Just my opinion on that one.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good shout, and I think you're right. I mean, it's almost a dead cert now that we're going to have a three-way in Cardiff between Flash Morgan Webster, Mark Andrews versus Gallows versus the Grizzled Young Veterans, and I think that you've got three different teams there, so I think the dynamic should be pretty strong. You definitely got Flash and Andrews as the more kind of dynamic, high-flying duo. You've got Gallows as kind of the more powerhouse team, and then you've got GYV full of double team maneuvers and submission holds. So you've got three different teams there, three different styles that I think will add to a pretty competitive and exciting match. And if you think back to when GYV won the titles against Moustache Mountain in Blackpool in January, that was one of, if not the best match of the night, and that was the opener. I wouldn't be surprised if this three-way tag match in Cardiff is also the opener of the night, just to really get the crowd hot and ready for the rest of the evening. But I think that should be a pretty good match. Like you say, I'm not the biggest fan of Gallus, to be honest with you, not the biggest fan of Mark Andrews or Flash Morgan, but I think the three teams, like I say, the dynamic there of three different wrestling styles should make for an excellent match on the night. Then we get Radzi. He catches up with the current NXT UK Women's Champion Toni Storm backstage with a rather emotional Toni Storm saying that at Takeover Cardiff she will be ready for Kaylee Ray. Now, I've been critical of Toni Storm in the past on this podcast, of Toni's character, or it's been a little bit one-dimensional, and I don't think I'm the only person that kind of thinks that. But here we saw a more vulnerable, a more emotional Toni Storm, proving that she is capable of demonstrating more of a character than she has shown us before. In this interview, Toni came across as though she was apprehensive ahead of a clash with Kaylee Ray, and like I said, vulnerable and emotional. I think this is one of Toni Storm's better interviews, in my opinion, where she did show that more vulnerability and that more emotional side, as she's obviously thinking deeply about her match with Kaylee Ray in a couple of weeks' time. What did you kind of take from this interview with Toni Storm, Kieron, and kind of how she presented herself in this interview?
I firstly was kind of thrown by it. So to start with, she kind of rambled on a bit about pointless stuff. So I don't know if that was her kind of showing that she's stuck in her own head thinking about Cardiff, or if she was drunk or something. that's what it felt like to me at the beginning of it. It was like she was drunk. She just went off on a tangent.
Yeah.
But I think for just the end statement, it kind of proves the build-up of what Kaylee Ray's trying to do, obviously get into her head. So it become more clear at the end, but to start with, I was really confused. For promo-wise, yeah, was one of her better promos. She doesn't really do much promo work, to be fair. If she does do a promo, it's literally like 2 sentences on the person she's fighting on the next show, sort of thing. I mean, the only time you really saw like proper promos from her was when she was fighting Rhea for the rematch for the strap, and before they had their finals match as well. It's I don't know.
It's certainly Tony's weaker area and kind of area that she needs to develop in. But I certainly saw improvements this week compared to what I've seen before. Like you say, she's not a strong promo person. She's not a strong interview. She looks great. She's great in the ring, or certainly getting a lot better in the ring and getting more accomplished considering how young she is. And I suppose it's only natural when you're kind of that young. You know, you haven't got all the boxes ticked quite yet. But I think that if she were to progress and move on to the main roster at some point in the future, whether it be Raw, SmackDown, who knows, I think that her promos are certainly one of them. And I think she's aware. I think she's fully aware that her kind of mic work needs to improve, that it's one of her weaknesses. But I certainly saw, glimpses of a lot of hard work this week anyway, and certainly that last couple of lines where she was quiet, apprehensive, quite emotional, that kind of made me think, that she's obviously being coached by somebody, and that was an improvement as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I don't think she'll go from NXT UK to main roster. She'll sit in NXT for a bit. I think that's where, I think for me personally, that's where most of like promo side of things are done. Obviously, you've got a lot of people down there that are good with Mike. Obviously, you've got Adam Cole. Obviously, you've got Triple H, who is always good at delivering promos. Regal, who's very European when he does promos. So she's got a lot of people down there she can learn from. I don't really think, if you look at mic work on NXT UK, that there are really many amazing people on the mic.
There's only 2, in my opinion. I think Jordan Devlin and Zach Gibson spring to mind. I think they're the 2 strongest promos on NXT UK, I would say.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And Eddie Dennis as well. When Eddie Dennis comes back, he's amazing on the mic. So you'd say 3 there if you include Eddie.
So I forgot to mention about a spoiler alert, actually. As we mentioned, Eddie Dennis. He's not actually going to wrestle for Progress anymore. He hosted the last show from Camden. Jim was on holiday. And at the end, he announced that for family reasons and injuries and stuff like that, that he's only going to actually be doing NXT UK, but that he is fully recovered and he'll be back very, very soon.
There you go. So we look forward to seeing. I mean, Eddie Dennis has always been one of my favourites, and I thought he was probably one of the best, if not the best, heel on NXT UK when he was around. And great mic work and excellent in the ring. So I can't wait to see his return soon. But it makes sense really for him to focus and concentrate on NXT UK. I think that's going to be his long-term future. Probably putting more money on the table as well, to be fair. But that's a bit of good news there. So back to NXT UK. We had some backstage footage of Jordan Devlin about to be interviewed, where we see some bag or some luggage or some clothes being thrown against a nearby wall, and then we see Piper Niven and Rhea Ripley getting into a heated scuffle with a bunch of referees and trainers and agents getting involved to break them up. Now, although it's not been officially announced yet, I'm firmly under the impression that Piper Niven will be going up against Rhea Ripley at Takeover Cardiff, which if it does go ahead will be a pretty almighty smash mouth affair between these 2 powerful and impressive individuals. and I've always been a big fan of Piper Niven, formerly or more commonly known as Viper on the Indies, and of course Rhea Ripley. Then we get our second match of the night. Kenny Williams versus Travis Banks. So this match here is just about to get started when we hear the music of Noam Dar, with Noam signalling that he's going to be part of the commentary team for the match. The match goes up a notch with Travis nailing an impressive dive through the ropes onto Williams on the outside. Travis then gets a close near fall from a crazy double foot stomp from the top turnbuckle. Kenny then gets the head of steam with a back in time clothesline and a springboard back elbow before getting a 2 count with a top rope back elbow to Travis down below. So the action is fast and furious here. Travis soon gets back on the offense with his slice of heaven, followed by the Kiwi Crusher for the hard fought pinfall victory for the Kiwi Buzzsaw. So as Banks heads back up the ramp, he is taunted by Noam Dar at the commentary table, furthering their storyline and potential matchup at Takeover Cardiff in 2 weeks' time. So if you read the spoilers online, it looks like we are going to be getting a match at Cardiff on the main card between Noam Dar and Travis Banks. That's a match that doesn't necessarily excite me a huge amount. Now, I've become a bigger fan of Noam Dar over recent weeks because I think he makes a pretty good heel, to be honest with you, and he's half decent in the ring as well. But what's your thoughts on this match between Kenny Williams and Travis Banks, and kind of the aftermath, including Noam Dar as well, then, Kieran?
So it was an all right match. Again,
Yeah.
For me, this whole week of NXT UK, I think the guys needed more time. I mean, 4 matches in an hour window with all of the promo build-up they did as well. I just think they tried to cram a lot into one episode, just my opinion.
Yeah.
I think if these guys were given maybe 5 minutes more, it might not have been overshadowed by what happened after the match. I wasn't 100% sure what Noam Dar was doing to try and entice Travis Banks, pretty much talking to him like a dog, which I was like, is weird. Listening to Noam Dar on commentary as well was pretty funny. But again, for me, it was the whole match was overshadowed by the aftermath of it all. Don't get me wrong, it was a match where you saw the signature moves of both superstars, but for me there was no major build-up in the match, if that makes sense. So there was no feeling out process or anything. They both kind of just went in and went straight for signature moves pretty much, and
yeah, it was just purely there to build up Takeover Cardiff, wasn't it? And the potential match, or the inevitable match between Noam Dar and Travis Banks. But Noam Dar versus Travis Banks at Takeover Cardiff, kind of where's your head at regarding those two and that potential match at Cardiff if it goes ahead? Is that a match that you can get excited for?
Yes. So for me, they're very similar in-ring styles for me. I love Noam Dar. I think he's killing it at the minute with his cocky, arrogant stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was on the early days of Progress, and as you know, I'm watching through all of the chapters currently. So Noam Dar's always been a big one for me. So if you look at where he was in Progress, like 3, 4, 5 years ago, to where he is now, you can see a major difference in him. And I will always give credit to people where they've worked to improve themselves. Noam Dar is that guy for me. Travis Banks, I just love Travis Banks because he's part of the Kiwi Club. I love the Kiwi Club with him, TK, Cooper and Niwa. Plus, I've seen, obviously, as you know, I've seen Travis loads at Progress. And he surprises me every time. For me, from what you see from him at Progress to what you see him in WWE, it's very different. If you let Travis be more of what he is outside of WWE, I think he'll grow on more people. I think people look at him in NXT UK and they think he's stale. He's the same old moves. He doesn't adjust his battle strategy, shall we say. But he is quite innovative, and if you get him on the mic, he can be good on the mic as well. So some of his old promo work with Walter in Progress was brilliant. And so, yeah, for me, it could be a match I can get interested in if they announce it for next week's show and they can give it some build-up.
Definitely. Yeah, like I say, I've grown to like Noam Dar's cocky heel attitude. Before I found it quite annoying, and I think that's possibly how the gimmick is meant to come across. It's meant to come, like I said in one of my previous episodes, Noam Dar's just got the character in the face you just want to slap, to be honest with you. But I think that's what makes him such a good heel. Yeah, although I don't like him, I've got to give him credit for doing his job as a heel, because I don't think any heels are playing their part as a heel if they're likable. They do need to be hated. That is the whole point of being a heel. And let's go on to our next match, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I was surprised that I enjoyed it so much. But it was a match between Nina Samuels and Isla Dawn. So Dawn gets the momentum with a drop kick early on, followed by a small package by the White Witch of NXT UK, getting a 2 count in the process. Nina Samuels then gets the upper hand by driving Dawn's head into the middle turnbuckle, which looked pretty painful before Isla Dawn suffers a drop kick to the back. But Dawn drops Samuels with a stiff backdrop driver and a knee strike to the face of her opponent for another 2 count. Nina Samuels gets a close near fall of her own with a slingshot twisting slam, appearing to win Isla Dawn in the process. However, Dawn gets another 2 count from a high-angled half and half bridging suplex. And so far, both wrestlers have demonstrated some tough offense and to one another in this hard-hitting match. Then, with Dawn backing away from a rope break, Samuels drives Dawn with a solid forearm before executing her Nina Goroshi for the 1-2-3. Now, Kieron, I've got to say, it was another quick match, but for some reason, I really loved this match. It was stiff, it was full of big moves, and I wouldn't mind seeing a match between these two again in the future, maybe with another 5 minutes added to it. I just like this match because I thought that both competitors gave everything they had, and it seemed like a pretty intense and pretty stiff match. What were your thoughts?
So, as people who listen to the podcast in the past know, I'm not a massive fan of Nina Samuels. And I've said before, I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it. There's just something about her I didn't like. And then I said after Super Strong Style, she's kind of growing on me. This match helped her pull me over. You saw some very different stuff from Nina Samuels, and yeah, she's growing on me. Isla Dawn I've always liked. I think her gimmick's brilliant. Yeah. I don't think WWE NXT UK utilising her properly. She's gone from having a match for the title to now losing to Nina Samuels. So I think they could use her more. I think that just for the amount of like stars that NXT UK have got, if you look at it as how I'm looking at it in a minute, you haven't even got Jordan Devlin announced for the card yet, and that's a big name not to have on your card. So yeah, it's, don't get me wrong, I think it's absolutely brilliant. The match was amazing. I think, again, it was just a filler match. People will enjoy it because, like you said, you enjoyed it, hard-hitting style and stuff. But again, for me, it's a match you didn't really kind of have to have. There's no build to it, so it's not leading to anything.
Yeah, it's no consequence.
Yeah. So obviously, it's the first time Nina had beat Isla Dawn. So I don't know if they're going to now make that a, I don't know, best of 5 series because it's 2-1 to Isla. I don't know.
Here we go. Then we get to Sid Scala and Johnny Saint. They announced that after the wild brawl from Dave Mastiff and Joe Coffey on last week's NXT, that Mastiff and Joe Coffey will indeed get a rematch, and it will be another match that's been added to the Takeover Cardiff card, and it will be a last man standing match. So last week's match, it was a wild brawl, only went a few minutes, so there was no conclusion because both guys just got so involved in the brawl that ensued, and Yes, the rematch will be in 2 weeks' time in Cardiff. It has been made official as one of the 5 matches on the Takeover Cardiff card, and it will be a last man standing match. So this is the first gimmick match, I think, that's been announced for Takeover Cardiff. What's your thoughts on Dave Mastiff and Joe Coffey? I think it's going to be a pretty intense brawl and hard-hitting match. Those are the sort of matches that we do like, and I think to be there live in person to witness a match like this where, you know, they could brawl into the crowd, we don't know, but I'm looking forward to this one. This one does definitely stand out to me in one match I'm definitely looking forward to. How about yourself?
I'm amped for this. As soon as I announced, I was like, yes. So I don't know if you remember, but when I last did the podcast with you, we kind of talked about what they'd do with Joe Coffey, and I did say they would probably put him in a program with Mastiff because of how building around the time, and I did say it would be some sort of stipulation match. So I called it 6 weeks ago. Wasn't quite 100% sure what the match type would be. I kind of went Falls Count Anywhere instead of Last Man Standing. But again, Last Man Standing is pretty much a Falls Count Anywhere match, so I wasn't far off. But no, this match, if you remember correctly, I think Dave Mastiff's first, so Takeover Blackpool, I believe he had a no disqualification match with Eddie Dennis.
Correct.
And that was absolutely brutal and brilliant, just those two. Yeah. So if you add the concept of Joe Coffey, who can take a battering as well.
And going back to Takeover Blackpool, I felt that Joe Coffey and Pete Dunne had the match of the night, that insane main event to close out Blackpool. So those two together, Mastiff and Joe Coffey. Yeah, that's going to be. It's not going to be for the faint of heart. Let's say that anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be. There's going to be a lot of weapons used. There's going to be a lot of smashing of things, and I think it's going to go pretty much all over the arena. Because you know, for fact, neither of them are going to back down. They're going to take hard shots, and they're just going to look to dismantle each other and literally brutalise each other. So yeah, it's going to be brilliant.
There we go. Then we get footage of what appears to be Walter's wrestling boot camp in Germany, with Walter chopping, slapping and smashing his students with his message to Tyler Bate that he dares Tyler to meet him face to face on next week's NXT UK TV. Walter was brutalising his students in Germany, and he was kind of visualising them as being Tyler Bate. But that was some pretty interesting footage. We obviously know that Tyler Bate is going to be Walter's main event opponent for the NXT UK or the WWE United Kingdom Championship. We also get to see Eichner versus Bartel against the Hunt on next week's show. All of which will be covered right here on the Wrestling with Johners podcast. Then on to our main event of NXT UK, Ilya Dragunov. We spoke about him briefly earlier in his recent Progress match against Walter, but this week on NXT UK, he'll be going up against Cassius Ohno. So Ohno comes out to the ring with a bright yellow shirt saying Wrestling Genius on it, before we get the ever intense entrance from Umbaziba. Ilya Dragunov. This match was pretty intense in itself, with Ohno whipping Dragunov into the ring post before connecting with a big boot to the face of his opponent. Then in a move that appeared to worry the commentators and the referee, Ohno runs Dragunov face first into the ring ropes, landing hard onto the canvas, and with Dragunov lying underneath the bottom rope, Ohno drops a big leg for a close near fall. Then as Dragunov goes for what appears to be a swing around the ropes, he is nailed with another almighty big boot from Ohno. So far this match has been very physical between these two very accomplished wrestlers. We see Dragunov reverse an attempted hammerlock suplex into a suplex of his own. Dragunov connects with some super stiff lariats using his already injured right arm. Ohno then drops Dragunov from shoulder height with his with the Russian. Dragunov landed hard on his right shoulder, but Ilya powers through the pain to execute a German suplex on his much larger opponent before catching Ohno with a big dive through the ropes on the outside. Then Dragunov gets a very close near fall with a gigantic powerbomb on Cassius Ohno. However, in the conclusion of this match, Cassius runs Dragunov headfirst into the ring post on the outside before rolling Dragunov back into the ring, delivering his rolling elbow to the back of the head of Ilya Dragunov. Ohno hooks the leg and gets the hard-fought pinfall victory in this very hard-hitting match. So, Kieron, I'd love to know your thoughts on this match. I felt that it had a real sense of realism, some super stiff moves, some real intense exchanges between these two. Definitely a strong main event, a strong style main event, you could say. And one thing is for sure, Dragunov knows how to sell. He definitely sold his ass off in this match against Cassius Ohno. A really good match, a great way to end this week's NXT UK. What did you think?
Match was brilliant. So I've spoke before in the past of people who want to learn how to wrestle and stuff like that they should watch like certain matches. This is one of the matches you need to watch. It told a story. So obviously going into that, you've got, and may I add correctly so, Cassius Ohno is a wrestling genius. He can adapt to any wrestling style against any opponent. I think the ending, for me, was the wrong way round. I think Ilya should have gone over instead of Cassius. I don't think Cassius going over is really going to build to anything, where if Ilya went over, it could build to, obviously, a future match with Walter. But all in all, that match was absolutely brilliant. And anyone who wants a lesson on how to sell, how to target a body part, how to get the crowd over with pretty much anything you do in ring, that is a match you need to watch. And just take a notepad out and watch. Look at the finer details of the match. Look at the facial expressions of the people and everything like that. So that for me, so you know how earlier I was saying that matches don't tell stories. That told a story absolutely brilliantly and is probably one of the best just NXT weekly matches I've seen for a while.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a history-making match. I think the result should have gone differently, should I say. And again, as I was talking earlier about big people not making it onto the Cardiff card, the match didn't really have a ending to a storyline, but they could use it to build something in the future. Yeah. So that's why I thought maybe if Ilya went off, he could have put his name in the hat, made main event a triple threat. I know it'd have no major storyline building, but it's just something I'd really want to see. Walter Tyler versus Ilya in a triple threat.
I'll tell you what, Kieron, it wouldn't surprise me if we see Cassius Ohno and Ilya Dragunov maybe in a rematch on the pre-show or the undercard to Takeover Cardiff, because they're going to have a couple of matches ahead of the main show, ahead of the main card in Cardiff. And this could be a pretty good pre-show match, which will obviously be shown the following week on NXT UK. That would be a good match to get the crowd going as maybe an opener to the night in Cardiff.
Yeah, I think that would literally just set people on fire.
Because I don't think this is the end between the two of them. I think that, like you say, you know, that the heel got the victory in this occasion, but in all feuds, the babyface always gets the upper hand in the end. There's no bigger occasion than a Takeover Cardiff, even if it is on the undercard. I wouldn't mind seeing these two in Cardiff.
I would love to see those two live in Cardiff. It would. If I saw that before the main card, it would definitely get me riled for the main card.
Definitely.
I'm loud as anything at a show. No matter what, you'll probably hear me no matter where you are in the arena from me. So me and Ashley have a habit of being very, very loud. You probably, if you watch Progress on Demand, you'll hear us all the time.
Yeah. So that was a really good episode of NXT UK, I'd say. Plenty of fun build as we head closer to Takeover Cardiff. Was it 3 or 4 strong matches? Certainly the match Morgan Webster versus Mark Coffey was a good way to open the show. I enjoyed the Nina Samuels Isla Dawn match, and then that brutal main event between Cassius Ohno and Ilya Dragunov. Like I said, so many weeks on the trot now. If you're not watching NXT UK, then what are you doing? There's a lot of great content on the WWE Network, and this is definitely up there amongst some of the weekly shows that you have to be catching each and every week. I know there's so much wrestling content out there, not just WWE based, but you've got all the AEW stuff that's going to be available soon, and certainly the shows they've had up until now. You've got New Japan, and they've recently had about a month's worth of G1 Climax. So that there's so many promotions out there and so many shows, and I know it's difficult to keep up with everything. But one show I would definitely recommend, and I know Kieron will echo my sentiments here, NXT UK is definitely one that you should be catching on a weekly basis. And if you're not already, start doing it, and start with this week's episode. Definitely a good introduction to NXT UK if you haven't started watching it. But let's have a look at this week's NXT then, Kieron. And if I'm not mistaken, it's only got 2 matches on this week's NXT. Now, these 2 matches were recorded before Takeover Toronto from last Saturday night. Now, myself and David Anderson did a full review of NXT Takeover Toronto this past week. So if you haven't heard our review, go out and check that. It's available on all popular podcast platforms, including iTunes, Podbean, Google, and Stitcher, Castbox, YouTube. Go out and catch that review. But this week's NXT, as I said, you've got 2 matches that were recorded before Takeover Toronto. The first of which was the returning, the reforming Breezango. So Tyler Breeze and Fandango, and they had a reasonable run on the main roster. But to be honest with you, Tyler Breeze was completely mishandled when you compared what he did on the main roster to how he was on NXT and as an NXT talent. Now he's back on NXT, and he's got his tag team partner back alongside with him, going up against the Forgotten Sons. So this kind of match, this feud of sorts, was built up very, very quickly on the last couple of weeks' worth of NXT TV, where Tyler Breeze was in a match against Jackson Riker, if I'm not mistaken, and he was eventually beaten down by all 3 members of the Forgotten Sons, and Fandango made his surprise return. And Fandango was never officially part of NXT as we know it now, but he was on kind of the weekly kind of season that was, yes, it was like a TV show, a bit like a soap opera version of NXT from about 4 or 5 years ago, probably longer than that, when he was Johnny Curtis, before he got repackaged to Fandango. So you could say this was his first match on the NXT brand as we know it nowadays. But as we're aware, this match was filmed prior to Saturday night's Takeover. And as we've discussed previously on this podcast, Fandango made his surprise return a couple of weeks ago, coming to the aid of his partner, Tyler Breeze. So on last week's NXT, Fandango said that we would be seeing a reimagined Breezango, and to a certain degree, he was right with Fandango and Breeze wearing all black attire, all black ring gear here in their return match. So the match goes to the outside pretty early in this match, with Breeze backdropping Steve Cutler on the floor on the outside, with Jackson Riker soon getting involved by entering the ring to floor Breeze with a forearm to the back of the Gorgeous One's head. Then Jackson Riker gets involved again with interference for a second time in close succession, and then he gets ejected from the ringside area, from the ring or the ringside area by the referee for his outside interference. Fandango soon gets tagged in and hits a tornado DDT. However, Fandango's offense is short-lived as Blake and Cutler hit a pretty neat Frankensteiner flying headbutt combo. Then Blake and Cutler on the outside, Fandango executes a tope con hero over the top rope and onto his opponent on the outside. Breezango win the match eventually with a pretty impressive catapult from Breeze directly into a forearm smash from Dango, sending Blake backwards back onto the knees of Tyler, allowing Dango to come over the top rope with a slingshot clothesline, hooking the leg and getting the 1-2-3 for the pinfall victory for the returning Breezango. So this was an action-packed match. Certainly not a memorable match for any stretch of the imagination, other than the fact that it was the return of Breezango, and good to see Fandango back after being out of action for about a year, I believe. So it looked great. And we'll probably see a lot more of Breezango. Now, Breezango could be a team that could do wonders in NXT. Certainly, they will have, the the ability to do more in NXT than they ever had the opportunity to on the main roster. But yeah, really good to see Fandango back in the ring, and a good victory for those two. What were your thoughts on this match, Breezango versus the Forgotten Sons, Kieran?
So it was always a given they were going to win. I personally would have liked to see them lose. Give them something to chase on their return. So for me, they've beat former number one contenders for the tag team titles. So what's stopping them from going straight to the title picture? It's no major build for me. Obviously, you have the 3-on-1 beatdown, Fandango's return, boom, now you've got this match. I think the match, obviously, as I just stated, I think if the Forgotten Sons would have gone over, you would have had more of reason for... So as Fandango said, they need to change their appearance, as I think is how he worded it.
Yeah, the all black attire wasn't exactly a reimagined version of those two. So just changing your ring gear kind of isn't really going to cut it. And yeah, it might have been a slightly darker Breezango, but other than the black ring gear, they didn't look any different, in my opinion.
And they didn't work any different in ring either.
Yeah.
And so they've pretty much gone straight back to how they were on the main card. I agree with your sentiment as well, with saying they'll probably be more utilised on NXT. Most tag teams will. The tag team division on the main card is just not utilised at all. When you look at the tag teams you've got there and stuff like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're going to be the ones that beat Street Profits when Street Profits finally go up to the main roster. Again, with your sentiments about Tyler Breeze, he's not really being used properly on the main roster. You could say Samoa Joe. The only real big ones that have come up and actually been utilised correctly, in my opinion, is Seth and KO. Sami Zayn, for me, hasn't been used properly, and neither has anyone else. So for me, him being called up was, again, just normal WWE stuff, which makes me worried about Johnny Gargano.
Yes, that is quite worrying when you consider how Johnny might be utilised. I know this might be a fairly unpopular opinion, but I think if you build 205 Live around somebody like a Johnny Gargano, and he could be the face of that division and help to kind of really improve and move that brand on, I think it needs a top name like a Johnny Gargano to really make the cruiserweight division better than it is at the moment. And Drew Gulak has been a great champion. I thought Buddy Murphy was a great champion, same for Neville when he was around, but Johnny Gargano is kind of just that notch above those names, and I think that he could be a success on the main roster if he was put on a slightly smaller stage like a 205 Live. But at the moment, I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's NXT for a little bit longer. And I know they had a set of tapings last night, and if you kind of had a look at the spoilers from that, you'll probably realise that he's not going anywhere just yet. But then after this match, we get Kathy Kelly catching up with Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish backstage after their loss to the Street Profits at Takeover, proclaiming that once again the illegal man was pinned, with camera footage plainly showing that Kyle O'Reilly tagging Bobby Fish as he gets propelled into the ropes, knocking Fish off the ropes shortly before Kyle O'Reilly got pinned for the end of that match. So whether that was intentional or not, it looks like we could be getting a rematch somewhere down the line between Undisputed Era and the Street Profits, based on the evidence that they've been able to provide us, that it was in actual fact Bobby Fish that was the legal man, but it was Kyle O'Reilly that got pinned by Montez Ford at the end of that match in Toronto. We then take a closer look at the new Io Shirai and her descent into darkness, with a match at Takeover against Candice LeRae being one of the best matches of the entire weekend, in my opinion. Not just Takeover or SummerSlam, but of the entire weekend. But also a heel turn and character development over the last few weeks has been second only to the changes that we've seen with Bray Wyatt and the birth of The Fiend, in my opinion. And of course, Io Shirai defeated Candice LeRae in what was a brutal and well-worked match on Saturday night at Takeover. You can hear all about that, as I said, and my entire thoughts on Takeover Toronto in episode 57 with David Anderson. So go and check that out in the archives. While we're talking about Takeover Toronto, I'd also like to give props to the Velveteen Dream, Pete Dunne and Roderick Strong, who pulled off another world beater in their match for the North American Championship, with Dream retaining only just against the Bruiserweight and the Messiah of the Backbreakers. So that was another stunning match between those three, and so good to see the Bruiserweight back on an NXT TakeOver. Then, of course, we had that epic 46-minute 2 out of 3 fall match between Adam Cole and Johnny Gargano for the NXT Championship. Cole won the first match via disqualification, with Gargano winning the second fall in the street fight via tap out, and then the third and final fall going to Adam Cole, when Cole managed to win the match by the skin of his teeth after both men fell from that demonic cage, that platform on top of the cage, crashing through the tables down below in one of the best matches in NXT history. So if you haven't seen Takeover Toronto, you've got to catch it. It was a hell of a show, as you always get with takeovers anyway. Before the final of the NXT Breakout Tournament, we then get a recap of the first round and semi-final matches ahead of tonight's match between Cameron Grimes and Jordan Miles. In the first round, you may remember Angel Garza beating Joaquin Wilde, and Joaquin Wilde is, of course, the former DJZ. Cameron Grimes beat Isaiah Swerve Scott in the first round. Bronson Reed beat Dexter Loomis, and Jordan Miles beats Boa in the other first round match. In the semi-finals, it was Jordan Miles who defeated Angel Garza, going through to the final, and Cameron Grimes defeated Bronson Reed in his semi-final, setting up tonight's match between Jordan Miles and Cameron Grimes. So, Kieron, I have to ask you, if you've been following the NXT Breakout Tournament, what were your thoughts of some of the matches, some of the characters that you've been introduced to, and kind of your thoughts ahead of this final match between Jordan Miles and Cameron Grimes?
So, for me, the right two people make it to the final, I'm a bit disappointed with how a couple of people were used. So, obviously, DJZ, I'm really disappointed he went out first round. Obviously, I've seen him live. I think he's absolutely brilliant. He's a brilliant athlete. But again, I say that, but Angel Garza completely surprised me in that match, because I've not really heard much of him beforehand. So from what I watched of the tournament, the two people did make it to the final that should have made it to the final. I'd not really heard much of ACH before his NXT stuff. So obviously, like I said to you, I always do a little bit of research. So I watched some of his previous stuff and then watched him obviously on NXT every week. And I think we've still got a lot more to come from him.
Definitely.
The only thing that's bothering me at the minute is he's a lot like Apollo Crews. With like I think he might have more on the mic for him than Apollo Crews.
Yeah, I think he's got a lot more charisma. He's definitely, I think he's got a better character, in my opinion, which I think has been the one thing that's held Apollo Crews down, to be honest with you. I've got to agree with you. They, got similar styles, similar wrestling styles in the ring, but I think Jordan Miles definitely has the edge as far as the mic work and the kind of the charisma, in my opinion, anyway. And I've not seen a ton of him, to be honest with you. Only what I've seen on YouTube and through the WWE Network since his debut. But yeah, carry on.
So yeah, that's my only concern, is if he gets the Apollo Crews treatment. I think Apollo Crews could be a lot better if he could go back to his Uhaa Nation stuff. That was always something that got the crowd over. It was like Moose with his Moose stuff. Uhaa Nation was always something that got the crowd riled up and popping. So I think they repackaged him wrong, in my honest opinion. And I don't see what WWE's issue is with bringing people in from the indies and keeping their indies name. Let's face it, WWE are a massive enough company where they can do a payoff to keep the trademark name. AJ did it, but that's because AJ trademarked his own name, and it's the same with Samoa Joe. But yeah, I think maybe they need to take Apollo Crews back down to NXT. Let him sit there for a year and a half or so, let him discover himself, repackage himself, and then bring him back up and use him properly. Because for me, he's a guy that could go toe to toe with Seth, and they would have an absolutely outstanding match. But we're never going to see it.
And any other characters in this NXT Breakout Tournament that kind of really surprised you? And you mentioned Angel Garza. I mean, Angel Garza seems to be the revelation of this tournament, really, because certainly in his first round and semi-final match, although he's coming across as a bit of a cocky heel, he definitely, the fans really appreciated him, and he was a bit more of a babyface than anything in terms of the way that he was received by the Full Sail crowd anyway. But anybody else that kind of jumped out at you?
So Charles Samuels, obviously, he kind of played the same gimmick he played in TNA, eerie, kind of stalkery kind of guy. No, Samuel Shaw, not Charles Samuel. Samuel Shaw.
The Dexter Loomis character, yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't really surprised by that. Bronson Reed, I didn't really do any research on at all. So when I saw the legit size of that guy and what he can do in the ring, reminded me a bit of Brutus Clay. But obviously he's a hell of a lot more athletic than Brutus Clay was. So another surprise really there for me. Boa, I'd like to see Boa versus maybe Travis Banks with the stiff kicks and stuff. I think they'd have a good match.
True.
Cassius Ohno as well. Kushida would be a good one for him.
Yeah, very good. What about Isaiah Scott? Isaiah Swerve Scott, the former Shane Strickland. So he's definitely. I mean, he had a fantastic match on 205 Live against Drew Gulak. And I think it was a non-title match, but those two had a barn burner. I don't know if you was able or lucky enough to catch that match, but Shane Strickland was obviously very popular on the Indies, a former Evolve champion as well. Now got a kind of a name change now that he's on NXT. But your thoughts on him?
I loved him, and I was disappointed that the first round match was him versus Cameron Grimes, to be honest. But as I did say to you, because I think it was me and you covered the first week of the Breakout Tournament, and I did say beforehand that whoever won that match would be in the finals, and I wasn't wrong with that. My problem is, like I said to you off air, I'm quite behind on my wrestling at the minute, with work and stuff, and I still haven't watched SummerSlam or Toronto, and I've got about 4 episodes of 205 to watch as well. So I haven't actually had the privilege of watching that match, but I will get round to it over the next couple of weekends, because obviously I've got a few weekends booked off with an occasion next week, and obviously NXT Cardiff the week after. So I will watch it, and like I said when we were discussing the participants, I saw a lot of Isaiah Scott with Lucha Underground as Killshot.
True.
And I knew then he was going to be a brilliant person. Obviously with Shane Strickland as well, I watched a lot of that stuff, and he was amazing then. So for me to say that he surprised me would me be lying to myself. I actually expected more, and I'm hoping we get to see more. He's a guy that could definitely fight for the North American title. I'd love to see him versus Velveteen Dream. To be fair, I'd love to see him versus Roddy. I'd love to see him versus Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, pretty much anyone, because I know for a fact if they get a decent amount of time, they'll put on killer matches. So yeah, for me to say that, I'm not. The entrants in there, all of them surprised me in different ways. Some of them negative, some of them positive. The two that were negative were Akeem Wilder and Isaiah Scott, but that for me is just because I thought the results were slightly wrong.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, as you said, possibly the two strongest competitors were in the final. And no doubt, the other names that you mentioned, Joaquin Wilde, Isaiah Scott, will no doubt get their time to shine in NXT. They certainly made a good impression, whether they got knocked out. They both got knocked out in the first round, but certainly made a good impression for themselves in their first round outings anyway. Back to this match, Jordan Miles versus Cameron Grimes. Remember, this was recorded live in front of the Takeover Toronto fans just before it went to the main card. And this was, of course, the final of the NXT Breakout Tournament. So Jordan Miles in this match is giving up around about 4 to 5 inches compared to Cameron Grimes, and probably a good 30 to 40 pounds in weight once again against Grimes. But Miles will certainly outpace the more grittier Cameron Grimes. Grimes soon takes control with a giant forearm after Miles leaps the ropes to the outside. So quite an impressive way to start the match there. Both before being driven face first into the middle turnbuckle, getting a 2 count from that move. Grimes then connects with a brutal lariat in front of the 2 count. Miles gets some momentum with a soccer kick to the chest of Grimes before getting a 2 count from a huge flying crossbody from the top turnbuckle. The match turns again with Cameron Grimes getting a close near fall from an orange crush, like an X-plex suplex maneuver. Grimes then delivers a spinning mid-air power slam for another 2 counts in a move that got This Is Awesome chant, and it was a pretty awesome move in itself. Miles eventually gets the win with an excellent 450 splash, not only winning the match but also winning the NXT Breakout Tournament with a prize of an NXT Championship opportunity of his choosing. So could Jordan Miles opt for the North American title shot or maybe an NXT Championship match? Nevertheless, that was an excellent match and a great way to cap off what was an excellent tournament as well, and a great way to introduce 8 very good prospects for the future of NXT and WWE. So a really good match. I think it went about 12 minutes all in all, Kieran. 2 excellent wrestlers, 2 very contrasting styles as well. You've got Cameron Grimes with his more smash mouth, kind of stiff, strong style wrestling, you could say, full of lariats, forearms, and then you've got Jordan Miles with his more innovative, more dynamic, high-flying manoeuvres, a lot of pace there, and winning with a 450 splash. But some good offense from both wrestlers. The crowd seemed to be really loving it and really were into the action. I'd love to know your thoughts on this match, and Jordan Miles is the winner.
Completely brilliant, right choice. So I've been racking my brain since watching to kind of work out what sort of title Miles will go for. Obviously NXT is the direct shot, but don't think that would happen. North American, with the promo from Pete, the North American title picture is pretty much going to be Pete Velveteen Dream for a little while. Or at least until the next takeover. So I was thinking maybe tag, but I was trying to think of who his partner would be. And we were talking about Apollo Crews earlier, and obviously Apollo Crews has popped back up on NXT.
True. Yeah.
So I'm going to go with a little bit of a surprise on that. I think he's going to go for the tags and pick Crews as his tag team partner potentially. Or Isaiah Scott.
Yep, that would be a good pick. Yeah.
So yeah, that'd kind of be my prediction, let's say, for that. But no, that whole tournament for me was absolutely amazing. You saw, like you said, it's a brilliant way to get 8 people in for the future. Obviously, you can kind of predetermine from background research and stuff of how WWE will go with past track records. Wouldn't surprise me once Killian Dane's done with Riddle or Riddle's done with Dane, however they want to book it. It's obviously going to be Riddle going over because they're trying to make him look as strong as possible. Maybe Dane versus Bronson Reed. I was trying to think of ways for all 8 competitors to stay in there. Angel Garza, probably be a good North American contender. Give him a little bit more time to develop his character with the fans. because you said about him being a cocky, arrogant heel. It's over with the fans. He's a Mexican Noam Dar.
True. That's one way to look at it. I know that's one way to look at it. I know he's kind of because he kind of does the fake high five with the fans, and then he rips his trousers off to unveil his shorts underneath, and all the things that you would expect from a heel, but he gets cheered for it, so that makes him a babyface, surely. But he's definitely one to watch. I think he's got his character down pat, to be honest with you, and I think he's a very good wrestler as well. So I wouldn't be surprised looking at all of them, I think that Angel Garza could be the one that might go the furthest, if you see what I mean, because he seems to be the total package at the moment. But then you've got so many excellent wrestlers, and I think WWE have signed so many indie talent in the past. Certainly the last 4, 5, 6 years, they've signed up pretty much all or most of the decent indie talent out there. But I think sometimes that's their downfall. And we mentioned earlier how there's a lot of talent that's misused when they go up onto the main roster. And that's possibly because they've been signed for their in-ring ability. But that doesn't always come with being great on the mic or having a fantastic character, gimmick or personality, which I think is ultimately what's going to get you over, as a main roster star. And which is why some of the characters that get signed and then eventually go up onto the main roster do fail, because they're signed for their wrestling ability, but they'll get over based on their character. And if they don't have a strong character, then they'll never get over, certainly in the eyes of Vince McMahon anyway. But going back to Angel Garza, he's kind of got all of that. But you look at Isaiah Scott, fantastic wrestler, but he probably needs to develop on the mic work a little bit. Going back to our winner, Jordan Miles, I mentioned earlier that he does have a lot of personality, does have a great character, and I know that there was a video on the WWE PC YouTube page of Jordan Miles and his kind of experience of going to WrestleMania this year. Of course, he wasn't on the card, but him being a new signee to NXT, soaking in the atmosphere and kind of thinking of what could be in the future. And he really did show an amazing amount of personality just in that 2 or 3 minute video. But we've obviously seen what a fantastic wrestler he is in this tournament, and a very, very worthy winner. And can't wait to see which championship he contends for, who he goes up against. But Cameron Grimes as well, an excellent finalist, and I think he surprised a lot of people. Now, you've seen him wrestle a bit for Progress as Trevor Lee. Obviously, he had the same wrestling style there. It's nothing flashy, it's all hard-hitting stuff. And he's kind of got a bit of an old-fashioned kind of strong style gimmick, you could say, with lots of kind of forearms and lariats and submission holds. But I think he's another one that's got his character sussed out as well, that could go a long way. But what's your thoughts on Cameron Grimes? I know you've seen him wrestle a couple of times as Trevor Lee, and did he live up to your expectations in this tournament?
Completely. So obviously I watched a lot of his stuff in TNA when he first came over, and he was part of Shane Helm's little faction to make the X Division great again and all that sort of stuff. I remember first watching him on that, and I was like, oh my god, this guy is insane. Because he's got the ability to do high flying moves as well.
True. He has.
As you've seen with his literally spinning freaking power slam thing he does.
That is amazing.
Standing Spanish fly. His vertical leaping ability. You saw it against Bronson Reed. Bronson Reed had 4 or 5 inches on him. Yeah. And he still managed to jump up to his shoulders to hit the stomp. So he's a guy that literally has nailed down everything he's done. He's worked his craft. If you listen to some of the build-up with him, look at the people he trained with. Matt and Jeff Hardy.
Yeah.
He was in a wrestling ring at the age of 2 with Matt and Jeff. It was always given with those two, obviously Matt being the more smarter one and Jeff being the more daredevil one. He was going to have a hybrid style.
Did I hear somewhere that he made his debut at the age of 13 or something?
Yeah.
Something ridiculous like that. It's just crazy. And he's only in his early to mid-20s now, isn't he?
Yeah, he's 24, I think.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
But you say that, but look at Tyler Bate. Tyler Bate started training at, I think he was 12, I believe, and made his debut on his 16th birthday. And then look at what happened 2 years later.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's a case of if you've got the right people you're with, and let's face it, with Tyler Bate, he was training with Pete Dunne and Trent Seven. Trent Seven, a guy that had worked at Indies for years and has obviously worked with a lot of different wrestlers, picked up a lot of different things. And Pete Dunne, who just has the mindset of how to get yourself over. He knows what to do. Obviously, we've spoken in the past about my training session with Pete Dunne. For how young Pete Dunne is and the amount of knowledge he has about the business, I'm shocked that he's still where he is. I don't know if that's Triple H trying to kind of mollycoddle him at the minute, form him into something greater. So if you look at Pete Dunne's wrestling style as he is as a wrestler, like just his in-ring style, not like the bumps he takes and stuff, Pete could wrestle for another 20, 30 years with what he does. He's very joint manipulative. He could wrestle like Ric Flair. I mean, look how long Ric Flair went on for. And like I said before as well, is before Pete Dunne did the joint manipulation thing, it was only really majorly done by Doug Williams. And I know Doug Williams spent a lot of time with Trent Seven before he obviously retired, because he did his retirement tour. And obviously that culminated with Trent beating him for the title. But I know obviously in the Indies, Trent, Tyler and Pete travelled together a lot. So I know then, like in contrast, that obviously Doug Williams would have spent a lot of time with those three as a group. And I think all three of them have had that experience with more people to... I'm shocked at where they are, but I think they're smart at what they're doing as well. They're earning money in the little leagues at the minute, if we can say it that way. They put on the better shows, but they get paid the lesser money, I guess. But yeah, I think all 8 of those people need to spend a little bit more time in developmental with NXT. Cameron Grimes, so we were talking about people who you thought could relive and reignite, like 205. Cameron Grimes would be brilliant at that. Maybe in a year and a half's time, Cameron Grimes, Johnny Gargano, 205 title, WrestleMania, pre-show. Because let's face it, that's all it'll ever get.
Well, yeah, I hope that they kind of progress further than the pre-show, but it does seem to be the pattern. Yeah, who knows? You could be seeing Johnny. That might be Johnny Gargano's only chance when you look at it to get on a WrestleMania card. Although he does deserve much better. I think that unless he's got Triple H kind of looking after him, or looking after his back on the main roster. But then Johnny Gargano, he's an excellent storyteller. Very, very similar to the Daniel Bryan in terms of how they are size-wise, wrestling ability, being great storytellers. So kind of a bit of a lot of similarities there to Daniel Bryan, and we saw what happened to Daniel Bryan. Will lightning strike twice, and will something similar happen to Johnny Gargano? We can only hope, because we know what a fantastic hit and success he's been on NXT, especially with the amount of takeovers he's headlined, with the amount of 5-star matches he's had in the last couple of years. But at the end of the day, you've got one man to impress, and that one man is Vince McMahon. And I think Johnny Gargano's got a long road ahead before he gets anywhere near a WrestleMania card. But so all in all, I'd say that the NXT Breakout Tournament was a really big success and a big thumbs up. I think that when they do these tournament formats, and when they do these tournament formats in Full Sail, when you look at the Mae Young Classics, you look at the Cruiserweight Classics as well, the NXT Breakout Tournament, and anything in more of that intimate environment, that smaller crowd, I think definitely works. And I know that I've heard online reports this week that they're bringing back the Mae Young Classic for a 3rd year later on this year. So that would definitely be one to watch, where we see the kind of the premium female women wrestlers in the world that currently aren't signed to WWE in a 16-person elimination tournament like before. So when they do these more intimate tournaments in, say, Full Sail, it definitely works. And this is why I've got my kind of concerns. We spoke about the King of the Ring in front of the bigger crowds, the TV audience, where they have sponsors and adverts. There might be some matches that on paper look great that could go just 2 or 3 minutes that might end up falling on their face. But for this one, the NXT Breakout Tournament, definitely a big success. Hopefully it could be a yearly thing. That would be a great way to introduce new signees into NXT if they make it a yearly competition. Definitely a thumbs up for me, and I'm really excited, just the same as you are, Kieron, to see where some of the careers of these individuals go from here. But my friend, that brings us to the end of another Wrestling with Johners episode. So I want to thank you so much for helping us out with another podcast this week, Kieron. Before we say goodbye, where can my listeners find you online? Where can they see you? Have you got a Facebook or a Twitter account, or what groups are you a part of? And you mentioned earlier that you're quite often at the Electric Ballroom in Camden for Progress shows, but tell us where the listeners can kind of say hi to you if they want to.
So I've actually just started redoing my Instagram as well, so that is literally just at Kieron Reed. Twitter handle is the same, but I think it's at Reed Kieron 1791, and Facebook, you'll see me all the time posting on the page. I mean, I've just shared something whilst we were doing this podcast, something about Chad Gable. I'm not going to let it out on the podcast. I'll let the fans see it that are on the Facebook page. But yeah, you'll see me on there all the time, posting things, commenting on things. So if you ever got any questions or just want to pop up, say hi, just send me a message. My phone's pretty much always with me, and I'm always quick to reply. Same with Twitter. So yeah.
Superb. Well, thank you, Kieron. I hope you've enjoyed being part of this podcast. Can't wait to get you on again. I know that we've got you in a couple of weeks' time, the kind of preview to NXT UK Takeover Cardiff, so you're going to be kind of on that go home episode to talk about that week's NXT UK and kind of give our predictions and our thoughts to the matches that are going to be taking place on the Saturday, and then of course I will see you in person in Cardiff on the 31st. But thanks again, and we'll catch up with you soon, Kieron. But I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of of Wrestling with Johners, covering NXT and NXT UK. And if you did, please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and shout about this podcast. Tell your friends and tell your family, and keep listening to the Wrestling with Johners podcast for all of your weekly NXT and NXT UK updates. Without you sharing and subscribing to this podcast, we can't continue to grow. So hit like, share, subscribe. Do it now, people. Don't forget to hit us up on Twitter at @withjohners_pod. On Instagram at Wrestling with Johners, and search for our Facebook group Wrestling with Johners. We'll be back again next Thursday, where I'll be joined by Ashley Clements making his Wrestling with Johners podcast debut. But in the meantime, have a great weekend. Thanks again to Kieron, and we'll catch you all again soon. Thank you very much.